Yo, from what? So, obviously there's the. By the way, shout out to everybody because there's going to be some comments in this interview where it's like the culture vultures unite. I feel like anybody who's white in hip hop, they call us culture vultures. But I want to know at what point in time, because there's this narrative out there that you're very aware of. You've talked about it a lot, that you're the feds or people come on your show to get interrogated, etc. Do you remember what point in time that narrative, because I feel like it went from you kind of being like an underground beloved like YouTube channel where people were getting like fucking sick interviews, so all of a sudden it felt like there was like a stigma to a Vlad interview. Do you remember like that? Like, were you paying attention enough to feel that happening?
I mean, from the very first moment that I decided to do Vlad TV, it was calculated that I'm not going to be doing the type of interviews that were the norm in hip hop, which were radio interviews.
Correct.
And they're very surface level,
very cheeky, very, hey, I don't want to piss the label off.
Yeah, it was. There wasn't a lot of long form stuff because radio format is like, we just need a few sound bites.
100%.
And I just felt like nobody was asking the serious questions. Like, everyone was just dancing around trying to be friends with the rappers and hoping to get invited to the parties and being cool with the labels and all that shit. And I'm like, I looked up to 60 Minutes. Like, to me, 60 Minutes was, kind of like the goal that I had set for myself. Like, 60 Minutes, they do interviews that change global politics, that make a difference, that affect stock prices, affect presidents getting elected, like that type of thing. Not to say that I've accomplished that, but I'm saying that that's what I aspired to. And I felt like I was just bored watching all these interviews. Like they weren't asking the questions that me and my friends were asking. These were not the barbershops. When you go to a barbershop, this is not what people are talking about. They're not talking about like, let's talk about this feature on this album.
Who's on your album? Yeah.
Like, so I came in going like, yo, I'm going to ask the uncomfortable questions. I'm going to ask the real questions. I'm going to figure out a way to do it where the person doesn't storm out.
Yeah, where you want to make them feel comfortable.
There's an art to it all. So and with that came the whole, he's the feds or whatever. But honestly, I never really cared about that because I always knew that I was not the feds. I always knew I was not working with law enforcement. Like I always knew that I did my best to try to protect people. I never talked about open cases.
Active cases.
I there were situations with like Draco the Ruler, his manager wanted me to do an interview while he was still facing his murder case in jail, and I turned it down because I'm like, I don't want this to be part of the case.
Because it would have been.
It would have been part of the case, like Lil Woody. I didn't interview him until Young Thug accepted his plea deal because I knew that this interview was going to be part of this trial. If I did it earlier. So I've always been extremely careful. And if you look at 17 years and thousands and thousands and thousands of interviews, the only time that I know that an interview got used in a case, which it hasn't been yet, but it probably will be, is the Keefe D case.
Right.
And in that case, he wrote a book that was on Amazon that talked about everything that's in the interview. So and he said that he had immunity and so forth. So it's like, all right, well, you wrote a book, you want to do it, everyone's aware of what's happening. All right, cool, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you write a book, it's fair game to
talk about the book.
Yeah, I mean, because otherwise you're not talking to Keefe D if you don't have that book out.
Right.
I mean, I think too, the other thing is like interesting is like artists will put shit on social media. They'll go on Instagram Live and say shit. They'll tweet shit. They'll put shit in their records. And then they'll voluntarily go sit down for an interview and get mad if certain shit is brought up that they've already put into it's like pick your poison. You know what I mean? It's like,
I mean, one of the funniest things I ever heard, me and academics were talking about this when Ack and Meek Mill were beefing. One of the times that they
I was about to say one of the 30 times.
One of the 30 times they're beefing. And Meek Mill was like, yo, why would you repost pictures of me, my homies waving around guns when you know that we have warrants out. And it's like,
you posted them?
You're mad at academics over reposting the shit that you posted yourself.
Like you posted it yourself. Yeah.
Like I just can't understand this logic.
Yeah.
I can't get my head around this. It makes no sense to me whatsoever to say that.
Yeah.
But yet he said it publicly.
Yeah. It's like, but you did this.
People
did this. Can find this.
You're mad that academics reposted some shit that you should have never posted.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
How often do you do an interview, and whether it's because you might have a personal relationship or because you don't want to stir up some shit, or where you'll remove something like proactively on your own so it doesn't come out? Does that happen often, or does it
sometimes, but like
maybe somebody crosses a line, you're like, you know what, I don't want to.
Well, but it's up to me to steer this interview. Right. People think people like you and me don't do much. We just sit down, we talk to people. How hard is it? Anyone can do it. No, it's not that easy. It takes a lot of preparation, and it takes a lot of skill, and it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of relationships and time and everything else like that. So I already have a game plan coming into this interview. Like we do a lot of research that leads up to everything. So generally, you don't really get that many surprises. And if you do, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to cut this out. This is going to bite you in the ass later on.
Yeah.
So every so often it happens. Not that often, but that's because I steer it a certain type of way.
Is like your research process has to be insane though, because your interviews are so in depth.
Yeah.
But you do so many of them. I know you have a team, right? But at the same time, like you have to also kind of be invested into who you're talking to. So you also have to make sure you're applying yourself to whatever research your team brings to you. Like, how many hours a week are you diving in and preparing for these conversations?
It's all over the place. I mean, my assistant Evan, he does like the first, draft of the research, and he's been working with me for so long. He has a pretty good idea about where I'm going. But when it comes to certain, I'm older than him, and I've been in hip hop longer. So, I was a hip hop nerd.
Yeah, you have different cultural context to certain interviews.
Yeah, sure. but beyond that, it's like, since I was a teenager, I've been buying every XXL and double.
For sure, me too. I still got them in storage right now.
Yeah, I don't have that. Yeah,
I got all of them in storage.
Yeah, you're a better man than I am. But like, I would read everything from cover to cover, and a lot of this stuff never made it onto the internet. Right? This is just a magazine from 20 years ago.
You a callback from an article.
Yeah. Like, and I'll do that. I'll be like, hey, in this one article you mentioned whatever, and this is just from my memory banks.
Right.
And or watching you on TV Raps, stuff that
isn't on YouTube.
It just isn't on YouTube anymore. You have to have experienced it at the time. So, and also a lot, can be said about kind of experiencing music as it comes out for the first time. Like, it's one thing for a 20-year-old to listen to Michael Jackson's Thriller and say, wow, this is really good. It's something different to be my age and actually remember when Thriller came out and how big of an impact. And it was like, my God. And I was in elementary school at the time. I was still a kid. But you knew it was the biggest thing ever, even as a kid. And you can't really go back and experience that after the fact.
Yeah, it's like these, there's like kids who'll dive into like old Outkast or old Kanye, and it's like, but I went to the store and bought the CD on a Tuesday,
right?
You know what I mean? And like, I remember, like, there's certain. I think that's what I appreciate about a lot of your conversations is like you still do have that kind of approach, especially when it comes to some of the like older artists,
right?
Who I grew up listening to, you know what I mean? So you're gonna get that conversation. When did you? Because you pivoting and doing some of my favorite interviews you do, and I would say. The Hitman dude, is it Michael Francis? I damn near think you inspired him to do his own channel.
Well, yeah, maybe. Francis was not a hitman.
Or what was he?
He was a captain.
He was,
Sammy the Bull was a hitman.
Sammy the Bull was a hitman.
Yeah.
But you doing those Mafia interviews, because your Sammy the Bull shit's amazing.
Thank you.
Was there ever any, like, blowback for any of the stuff that those guys talked about that you personally experienced? I know a lot of those people are probably dead or in prison at this point.
I mean, I did this one interview where this Mafia guy, was bashing, I think, John Gotti Jr. and like his wife or something.
Yeah.
And then his wife reached out to me and was like, hey, some of the stuff he's saying is not actually true. Like, I don't weigh 300 pounds and, stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, I'll respect that. And then I cut certain things out just because I felt like, okay, well, if it's not true, I don't want to put it out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of that, but in general, no, I mean, me and Sammy the Bull kind of got into a bit of an argument before our first interview.
Yeah.
But it was like, I mean, it's not like I'm worried about the situation. It's not like I'm worried about my safety. It's like, I'm sitting there with security and,
Like, I'm assuming, like, would you, because you've done, like, the Hell's Angel stuff you do is dope. Yeah. Would you ever do, I know you've talked to people who, like, have, like, done cartel, like, task force shit or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the one line, like, I'd be super scared to fuck with is, like, talking to any former cartel members, active cartel members. Like, I feel like, is that something that
yeah, I would do it.
You would do it.
We had a guy like in Colombia that was supposed to set up a bunch of these interviews up, and ultimately I think they all fell through.
I'm not even worried about the Colombian because that's over the ocean. I'm from the Mexican cartels. Don't fuck around, boy.
Well, Colombian cartels are no joke either.
No, for sure. But there's an ocean you got to get over.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean, flights are cheap these days.